Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Today we're going to be tackling another topic in the news, and it is Harvard University has hired a new chaplain who is an atheist. Is that a contradiction? Well, of course it is. Everyone that has common sense can know that an atheist chaplain is a contradiction, because chaplains are there for the express purpose of providing spiritual, Christian, moral guidance to students at a college or university or seminary or educational institution. A chaplain is, by definition, a religious, spiritual leader, part of the community. That's what they originally were set up as, and to have an atheist as a chaplain is a contradiction. But we live in such a crazy and twisted world that now all of these things are under question. Is it really a contradiction to have an atheist chaplain? Yes, it is. And to even ask the question is really saying a lot about the people alive today, these secular people who don't have a clue. So let's read this article in Yahoo News. Here is the chaplain, so-called chaplain, Greg Epstein. So it looks like ethnically Jewish, but he's religiously atheistic. He doesn't believe in God. And so he's stepping in to be a chaplain. What we're going to find out probably is that this man is a good organizer. He's a good counselor. He's a really nice guy. And that's why they hired him, because he can talk to people. He can sympathize with people, put his arm around the shoulder of people going through problems. Only one problem. He can't pray with people. Now, I don't think he would pray with people, but you never know. In today's world, maybe he's actually willing to pray with someone even though he doesn't even believe in the God he's addressing. So let's read on and find out what is behind this whole issue. It says, the motto of Harvard University, which might as well be tattooed on aspirants to the American upper class, is Veritas. For those who never learned Latin, that was once part of standard curriculum. That means truth. It seems like an obvious fit for the nation's most prominent institution of higher learning. Isn't pursuing truth what a university is all about? But the motto's history isn't so simple, although it appears in several versions following Harvard's establishment, 1643. Most stress theological character of the truth to which the college was devoted. So, get that, the theological character of the truth. So the original motto referred to the spiritual, biblical, theological truth. And the college was devoted to teaching ministers of the gospel how to teach the Bible. Veritas Christo et Ecclesia. Truth for Christ and Church, read one version. In Christum Gloriam, to the glory of Christ, went another. The one-word version was adopted in the 19th century, part at the urging of poet Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was no friend of the Christian church, by the way. A surprising announcement on Thursday revived tensions between Harvard's original mission and its more secular orientation. The association of more than 30 Harvard chaplains representing a wide range of religious communities elected Greg Epstein as their new leader. The surprise isn't that Epstein is not a Christian, an element of Harvard's heritage that the university hasn't stressed for decades. It's that he doesn't believe in God at all. So they're right in reporting that Harvard has not stressed its Christian heritage. It is actually anti-Christ. Harvard not only doesn't stress Christianity, they actively fight against it. It's one of the most secular institutions in our entire country. It's probably the main source of secularism in our entire nation. Judges it produces are secular for the most part. Politicians, secular. Lawyers, secular. It is a leading secular humanist university. And even though it may not say right in the motto, we hate God or we don't believe in God, it's pretty much assumed that if you want to be an influential person at Harvard, you're not going to believe in God, or at least you're not going to believe in him very much. An atheist chaplain seems like a contradiction in terms. It is. Epstein's life work is to convince people that it's not. An ordained humanist rabbi. Oh, okay. A humanist rabbi. A secular rabbi. Secular humanist rabbi. That's a contradiction. Epstein doesn't oppose religious text, ideas, or practices, but he argues that people who doubt the existence of supernatural forces need their way of inculcating virtues, exploring the meaning of life, and sustaining communities that can extend through generations. Okay, that's fair. There have been philosophers all throughout the ages who don't believe in God. And they've figured out their own little system of morality, and they're all pretty flimsy, but they have them. But they don't call themselves chaplains, and they don't try to lead people who do believe in God, or they don't try to fit into a position that requires that you believe in God. Like, for example, he says he's a secular rabbi. Again, that's a contradiction. So in other words, some organization, some Jewish group, some Jewish church denomination let him in, ordained him as a, quote, rabbi, even though he didn't believe in God. And now Harvard is doing the same thing. They're letting him be a chaplain, even though he doesn't believe in God. So it must be that the situation over there at Harvard has so watered down anything distinctively Christian that you can basically be a atheistic pastor, atheistic preacher, atheistic minister, atheistic rabbi, atheistic chaplain. The words have lost all of their historical meaning. And that makes sense because at Harvard, the whole purpose of the college has lost its historical meaning. It was founded for the training of ministers to go into the churches to preach the Bible. And now it has so lost that historical meaning that it doesn't do anything close to that vision. In fact, it does the opposite. It opposes the preaching of God's truth in churches because it tries to argue against those truths. In a 2009 book, Good Without God, Epstein contrasts this approach to two rival forms of non-belief. One is the antagonistic atheism associated with figures like Marx, Nietzsche, and the so-called new atheists of the early 2000s. The antagonistic project tries to expose religious teachings as primitive myths at best, or at worst, intentional lies used to justify exploitation. Its goal is the liberation of humanity from superstition. And we're familiar with that militant atheism, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris. Some of these people are just in-your-face atheists who want to tear down the Bible, Christianity, the church. So we're familiar with that. And he's not that. That's good. That's good. That's a good start. One problem with this approach is that it hasn't delivered on the promise to replace ignorance with truth. Modern natural science undermined, or at least complicated, many traditional religious beliefs. Yet it doesn't answer questions about the origin of the material world, the basis of human consciousness, or the meaning of uncanny experiences that give rise to those beliefs in the first place. So, he's not a militant atheist in the mold of a Richard Dawkins and the popular atheist writers that are out there. And that's good. That's good. Doesn't qualify you to be a chaplain, but it does mean that you're a nice person and you're not trying to destroy the faith of a student, for example, coming into Harvard College. Say they're a Christian, but they're not very knowledgeable, they're not very mature, and some of these militant atheist professors will come in and try to destroy the faith of an immature young person and hopefully succeed in doing that, they think. That is mean, that's cruel, that's being a bully, and this chaplain evidently is not that. So that's good. Another issue is that antagonistic atheism can be counterproductive. Rather than persuading believers, polemics against religion are most effective in polarizing the whole subject. In the 19th century, antagonistic atheism helped legitimize the public expression of non-belief. But it also encouraged fundamentalist reactions that were more hostile to ideals of reason and freedom than the orthodoxies that the skeptics attacked. Finally, antagonistic atheists have a way of swapping one dogma for another. The most dramatic example is Marxism, which rejected any appeal to divine redemption while promulgating a philosophy of history leading to the ultimate triumph of justice on earth. Scholars dispute whether such movements are properly described as political religions, a term coined in the 1930s by the German political theorist Erich Vogelin. But there is at least an analogy between religious movements and modern ideologies. For these reasons, antagonistic atheism is probably a dead end. The main alternative is more subtle. What Epstein calls Reconstructionism doesn't try to refute religion. Rather, it seeks to reinterpret religious sources and doctrines in ways that dispense with appeals to miraculous events or supernatural beings. So, this is a more kinder, gentler atheism that tries to destroy Christianity, but in a kinder, gentler way. So, tries to reinterpret the Bible. This is sort of what Bultmann did with the demythologizing the Bible that he wrote about in the 20th century, where he went through the New Testament and he basically said any place where there is a miracle or supernatural, you have to reinterpret that. You have to metaphorical, figurative language that in order to have meaning. And that undercuts the real Christian faith also, but it does it in a more kinder way. Epstein has some respect for Reconstructionism, which can be traced back to ancient philosophy. Yet he sees it as dishonest, at least in recent versions. Unlike antagonistic atheism, religious Reconstructionists continue to talk about God and may even identify with traditional creeds and communities. What they mean by God, though, is so different from the personal deity of biblical monotheism, that it's kind of a pious fraud to suggest they're the same. So we're seeing this deconstructionism appear in some of the voices of evangelical Christianity. For example, some of these worship leaders, we saw the rock group, Christian music group Gungers, husband and wife group and band members, and they have gone through what they call a deconstruction, and they don't believe in biblical Christianity anymore. Yet the woman, Lisa Gungers, still says, well, I still believe in God. And it's the same way with some of these other figures in evangelical Christianity who have left the faith. They're saying, well, I still believe in God, kind of, but I've deconstructed my faith. I've demythologized it, like Bultmann, and more secularized it. And that's kind of what secular Judaism has done for a while now, for a long time. And kind of what the liberals, the modernists in the Christian Protestantism have been doing for at least a century now. They've basically reinterpreted, Harry Emerson Fosdick reinterpret everything to mean, resurrection of Christ as a symbol of life conquering death and all this. Instead of actually believing the historical miracles, they symbolic and figurative, all of them. Epstein's humanism avoids this deception. It is a deception. It is, because you actually have ministers standing up on Easter Sunday giving sermons in churches talking about the resurrection of Christ, and then at the end you find out, you don't really believe that it happened physically, you just think it happened figuratively or poetically. That is kind of a deception. As the book's title proclaims, he wants to be good without God. Even as he rejects theology, though, Epstein argues that religious practices such as ritual, meditation, or textual study meet irreducible human needs that conventional atheists neglect. At Harvard, and in his previous position as leader of the Humanist Community Project, Epstein organized interfaith dialogues, weekly services, including sermons, musical performances, and other activities that resemble traditional worship without appealing to a personal deity. He also provides counseling to students facing personal or ethical choices, much like rabbi, minister, or imam. So, again, he is trying to have faith without God. He's trying to practice church without any belief in a supernatural God. And that's deceptive, though, because you're going through the motion, but you're not really believing it. It's an intriguing proposal at a time when the unaffiliated are the fastest growing religious group. The trend is even more pronounced among the highly educated. At Harvard, nearly 50% of the class of 2019 described themselves as atheist, agnostic, and other. I did not know that. That is staggering. 50% of all the students at Harvard University describe themselves as atheist, agnostic, or other. These are going to be the future leaders of our nation, and they're training them up to be atheists. That is a bad sign for our future. In 2005, Epstein was hired at the university's first chaplain devoted to specifically this group. By all reports, he's had some success both as a mentor to others, humanists, and as a participant in Harvard's broader religious community. So he's gotten along with the Christian groups too, it looks like, because he seems like a nice guy. Yet the prospect for Epstein's humanism are dimmer than he might admit. One reason is that it seems most appealing to people who were brought up in demanding religious communities but no longer accept all the teachings or lifestyle prescriptions. The New York Times reports that many of the students who seek Epstein's counsel are such as religious refugees. Individuals in this position may find genuine comfort in humanism, but they will pass on that disposition to their children who will lack the same rigorous formation. Given the difficulty even conventionally devout parents have in transmitting beliefs, they probably won't be successful. Yet one of the central goals of the organized humanism is creating communities that can be sustained across generations. Well, good luck with that. Passing on a non-faith over generations. That may seem uncontroversial in the 21st century, but it raises uncomfortable questions about the very purpose of a university. Harvard's motto presumes that truth is important and worth pursuing, yet its shortened version makes no argument about why that's the case. For Harvard's founders, truth was worth pursuing because it set man in a right relationship with God. Bingo. There you go. The original founding of Harvard University was for the purpose of pursuing truth because it set a right relationship between man and God. Harvard's present leadership can only claim, like the administration of Faber College and in Animal House, that knowledge is good. Right. There's no connection with God. in the present Harvard University. As with humanist practice, the absence of justification isn't a problem on the individual level. Some people are inclined toward inquiry and debate as a matter of temperament. They pursue the truth as they understand it without further encouragement. But it is a problem for justifying institutions. Why should students, their families, and taxpayers devote billions of dollars to what is, in a sense, an unusual hobby? Too often the answer is simply to acquire advantages in the scramble for social and economic advantage. Epsteinian humanists aren't to blame for the challenges of secularization in originally religious institutions, but they aren't the solution either. Despite their apparent opposition, Harvard's Puritan founders and antagonistic atheists agreed that the truth will set you free. We can't replace that faith with a good-natured shrug. Okay, so the author of this article is questioning whether you can actually have a atheist chaplain at a traditionally or founded institution on the basis of Christianity. And he's right in questioning that. And I think everybody internally knows that it's kind of like so-called gay marriage. Marriage is between a man and a woman and produces procreation, produces offspring. And everyone knows that that's what marriage is. And yet in our hubris and our pride, our ego, our arrogance in our secular society, we think, okay, let's just redefine marriage to mean whatever we want it to mean. And so now we have a Supreme Court. Justice Kennedy wrote the decision, 2015, a Bergefell decision, stating that marriage can be between two men and two women, totally ignoring all of history, totally contradicting the Bible, saying we know more than God. We know more than the Bible. We know more than the Christian revelation, the Judeo-Christian revelation. We know more than them. And so what has happened, here again, you have a secular humanist institution redefining chaplaincy. Instead of now a Christian pastor who is teaching truth and counseling students how to live out that truth in their lives, here you have an atheist chaplain who is trying to redefine Christianity. He's trying to redefine the terms of a religious institution founded a long time ago on the basis of Christian principles. And what has happened is that you're going to get a lot of confusion, rightly so, and you're going to get people asking, what's the point? Why don't you just come out and say what you really are? You're an atheist. You're an administrator. Why don't you be a counselor? Why don't you be a manager? Why don't you label yourself correctly? But to label yourself or go by the title of chaplain is actually an oxymoron. But again, this has been done thousands and thousands and millions of times already by liberal Protestantism. As you have, there are, for example, right now in some of the Scandinavian countries, there are pastors who are atheists, and they're still in good standing with their denomination. I think that's taking place in Anglicanism right now, where you actually have pastors, ministers, church leaders giving sermons on Sunday morning, conducting church services in church buildings, part of the Anglican community, and they don't even believe in God. And how can they do that? How can they even be a part of a Christian church, and let alone lead the Christian church? Well, the reason they can do it is because Protestant liberalism has been redefining the terms of historic Christianity for so long that people are used to this. Again, I made reference to the fact that there are some pastors who get up in the pulpits on Sunday morning on Easter Sunday and talk about how when Jesus rose from the dead, what that means is faith arose in the hearts of the disciples that early morning long ago. And so how our faith should arise in us, that life conquers death on Easter morning. And so they actually teach that we don't have to actually believe that the physical body of Jesus rose from the dead. We can believe that it was done symbolically or metaphorically. In fact, you get the theologians writing about this kind of metaphorically and symbolically redefining the faith in their writings. I mentioned Bultmann before, but there are other theologians who try to do this switch. So this switch it's actually gutting the Christian faith of its miraculous supernatural content. This has been going on a long time. So this actually is not coming out of the blue. It seems to come out of the blue because all of a sudden it's kind of like a lurch forward. But there's been a slow, steady development, especially at institutions like Harvard. Harvard is a thoroughly secular university. It has nothing to do with its original founding. Nothing. And so it shouldn't really be a shock for us to hear something like this happen at Harvard. Now, what is more disturbing is the reaction of an evangelical pastor, Tim Keller, who was founding pastor and pastor for many years in Manhattan Redeemer Church. And he actually sent a message to Greg Epstein, the new so-called chaplain of Harvard University, the Atheist. He congratulated him on that appointment. Now, what is a Christian minister, evangelical, doing, endorsing and congratulating an atheist for stepping into a chaplain position? What is Tim Keller thinking? Well, probably what Tim Keller is thinking is that he knows Greg Epstein. I think they are friends in some sense. They respect each other. And he was just well-wishing a friend through a message. But really, you can do that, but you don't have to do that in the sense of congratulations for being appointed this position. You can say, while I don't agree that an atheist should be appointed to a ministry position at a college, especially the chaplaincy, I congratulate you on your own personal career achievements, even though I disagree with the college decision to appoint you in that position, because that position is a distinctively religious, spiritual, Christian position that requires, at a minimum, that a person believe in God, at least affirm God's existence, and that presupposes when you're praying to a real God, reading the Bible, you believe it's God's revelation, and so forth. So he could have said that, but he didn't. So Tim Keller, sorry to hear you say that. Well, I hope that's been a helpful commentary, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christ in Culture. God bless.